We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? I give the call to the honourable member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. On Monday, the Minister said she was damn proud of Labor's broken promises on capital gains tax and negative gearing. Today, Australia's biggest rental property manager, Ray White, said rents could surge by 30% as a result of Labor's toxic taxes. Is the Minister damn proud of making millions of Australians pay higher rents?
Order. Interjecting to someone to sit down is highly disorderly. Member for Chisholm and the members in that section. Well, I apologise if it's not the member for Chisholm, but someone there did it, and I'm not happy. And I'm not happy about it. Order. If I see anyone behaving like that, they will not be here to hear any questions or answers. The Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities has the call.
Thank you so much, Speaker. Really appreciate this question from the member opposite. Speaker, I think I've said to the parliament before that we should try to speak the truth in this chamber whenever we can. And I'm really worried for the honourable member opposite who's asked me this question for just the sheer number of mistruths that she was able to pack into one question. So let's just go through it one by one. The first is that she has knowingly misquoted me in her question. But the second is that she has reached for Ray White, and I want to read to the parliament what Ray White have said today. Ray White is not forecasting a 30% rise in rents. Now, Speaker, how incredibly embarrassing for the opposition, because this is actually the second day in the row that they have come into this parliament and misquoted a party saying this. So I just want to remind the parliament that when they came into the parliament yesterday, they accused the National Australia Bank of saying the same thing, and then the National Australia Bank clarified this was not a forecast, and it is important to note that we do not forecast rental yields. I mean, seriously, you just could not make this stuff up. Now, I just want to go back to basics, Speaker, and actually talk to the parliament about what's really going on here, not the fictional world that's being created by those opposite. Speaker, we've got really serious housing problems facing our country, and unlike those opposite, our political party didn't discover the existence of Australian renters yesterday. We have decades of advocacy for this third of our population, which is really bearing the brunt of what has gone wrong for housing in our country, Speaker. 25 years of Australian governments, and let's be honest, of every political colour, who have not done enough about this problem. And, Speaker, that is changing under our government. We have a massive and comprehensive policy that we are putting in place that supports renters to build more homes, to help with Commonwealth rent assistance, to improve rental standards, and perhaps mostly importantly of all, Speaker, to give what most Australian renters tell us they want most of all, and that is a realistic pathway into home ownership. Now, Speaker, let's not pretend that this is about renters. I have been in this parliament for 12 years now. I have never for a single day heard those opposite come forward and actually advocate for renters. What they are doing is using renters as a cover for a political campaign to defend a broken system of which renters are the main victims, Speaker. Well, on this side of the chamber, we've got real reforms to help renters around this country, and we'll keep advocating for them as we have for decades.
Member for Corangamite is warned. We're not having just random people saying what they feel like. Honestly. Order. The House will come to order immediately. Member for Robertson has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government progressing real reform and delivering real change? And why is this agenda so important to Australians? And what are the threats to this work?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Robertson for his question. and for his outstanding work looking after the people of the Central Coast. Now, as a government, we are taking action in so many areas where reform has been put off for too long or progress has been too slow. Putting in the hard work so we can deliver real change for Australians, just like the Housing Minister just indicated in that area. We're taking action because it's the right thing to do, both now and for the future. And last night, our reforms to safeguard and strengthen the NDIS passed the Senate. The NDIS is a cherished institution, and over 15 years it has truly proved itself to be one of Australia's great modern reforms, a reform that the Australian Labor Party is so proud of. And that is why we took action to make sure the NDIS is sustainable and is here to stay, providing the security, dignity and support that Australians need and deserve well into the future. And yesterday, our reforms tackling gambling harm passed through this House. Problem gambling is a very real issue, and the connection between gambling and sport is an issue as well. And doing something about it requires a national effort, and that is why we took action, legislating the strongest reforms to tackle gambling harm of any government ever, and striking a balance so that Australians can still have a punt, if appropriate and if they wish, on a Saturday afternoon. And today, the House has passed our reforms protecting Australian journalism now and into the future. The way that Australians consume news has changed, but the important contribution that the media sector makes to our Australian democracy has not. That is why we have taken action, putting in place reforms that encourage these tech giants to do deals with media companies. But if they don't, they will make a payment that will directly assist in the employment of journalists. Good reform, making sure that in the future we continue to have news media organisations. Now, none of these are easy reforms. They require listening, they require hard work, they require action. But that is what delivering real change requires. And delivering real change is what our government is determined to achieve right across the board.
Give the call to the member for Riverina.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel. The Australian Defence Veterans Covenant Oath says, "We undertake to preserve the memory and deeds of all who have served and promise to welcome, embrace and support all military veterans as respected and valued members of our community." This week, veterans and their advocates say the minister meant to represent them has, in their words, treated them with contempt. Is the minister confident veterans would agree he is upholding the Covenant Oath?
Give the call to the Minister for Veterans and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. And I thank him for referencing that legislation, because that was legislation that was passed by this parliament with the support of all sides, as you would absolutely expect. Because not only are we honoured by the presence of those people that have served in our Defence Force in our parliament, and we thank them for their service, but it is the responsibility of our nation, of our parliament, of any government, to make sure that we look after our veterans. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that proposition or what's in that legislation and set out as our obligation. And as I said at this dispatch box very early in becoming minister, there had clearly been failings in providing the necessary support, services, compensation payments, right treatment in service and for those people who had served. Not just by one government, by many governments, but that we all had to work together to make that system work better. And it's why there was a Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. And it's why we have worked so hard to make sure that we are working to implement the recommendations of the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide, amongst other changes and improvements in the system of support for our veteran community, but also making the lives of our serving men and women better as well. And as we do that, it's clear from the failures of the past that there's always room for improvement. And it's why we've also made sure that we've been working together with the veteran community and have always said in implementing change that we work with the veteran community to get those changes to work right for them. And I know, as I'm sure every former Minister for Veterans Affairs in this place knows, there has been built up over time a lack of trust in the Department of Veterans Affairs. And we know why. And we want to remedy that and we want to change that. It's why we made the investments in the department that we've made. And we continue to work to make it better for everybody. And I think we have been making it better. And is there more work to do? There absolutely and always will be. And that's what we will keep doing. And I hope that every government in the future will always keep working to make those systems better.
The member for Rann on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave to table this sacred document, the Australian Defence Veterans Covenant, so the Minister can re-familiarise himself with the words therein.
The member for McEwen will just resume his seat for a moment. He will get the call. The member is seeking to table a document. Yeah. Thank the Leader of the House. Give the call to the member for McEwen.
My question is the Minister of Health and Ageing, Disability and the NDIS. How is the Albanese Labor government securing the future of the National Disability Insurance Scheme and working with states and territories to deliver support for Australians living with disability?
Call to the Minister for Health, the Minister for Disability and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, and to the member for McEwen for that really important question. Last night, as he knows, the Senate passed the government's plan to get the NDIS back on track, and this is really important, essential reform because it had become increasingly clear, I think, Speaker, to the broader Australian community that this extraordinary social program, which has delivered so much to Australians living with disability, had nonetheless gone too big, was costing far too much and had become a soft target for crooks and for shonks. And the changes that were passed last night deal with all of those problems, and it sets the clearest possible path, I think, for a sustainable, secure future for the world's best disability insurance scheme. Now, while these reforms are essential, I know that they are, as the Prime Minister indicated, they're hard reforms, and I know that they are causing anxiety in some parts of the community, among some NDIS participants and their loved ones. And I want to assure those Australians and the broader community of a few things. This program will still grow. This will still be our biggest social program outside of the age pension, significantly bigger than Medicare, way bigger than the PBS, and it will remain the centrepiece of the most comprehensive suite of supports for people with disability that you will find anywhere on the planet, Mr Speaker. But even with the passage of those changes last night in the other place, there is still much to do. New eligibility tests are being developed right now to return the scheme to its original purpose, which was, as we all know, I think, to support people with significant and permanent disability. But that makes our work with state governments even more critically important, to rebuild those other support systems that used to exist at state level to provide that critical support to people with more low to moderate support needs. Every state and territory except Queensland has now finalised their implementation plans for the Thriving Kids program, supporting children under the age of 9. And those supports will start rolling out in only a few weeks' time, and they'll be fully up and running by the end of next year, ready for the new eligibility changes that take place on the 1st of January 28. But I have to say, Mr Speaker, Queensland needs to get moving in this area as well. Queensland families deserve the same commitment and the same action that we're seeing from every other state government, Labor and Liberal alike. And then we need to get on with the other critical work to develop supports for other groups, children over the age of 9, people with psychosocial disability and many others, Mr Speaker. But I thank the Parliament for their support for this critical plan. We now need to get on with implementing it.
Before I call the member for Indi, I'll just do some acknowledgements and welcome to Parliament. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is a delegation of homelessness and mental health sector representatives from across Australia who are visiting Parliament today to discuss how to tackle repeated homelessness as guests of the Minister for Housing and the member for Menzies. I'm also pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today as a guest of the member for Wentworth is Ms Chanel Contos, the founder and CEO of Teach Us Consent, a youth-led not-for-profit organisation focused on implementing consent education in our schools. And also I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is Dr Nicholas Pappas AM, Chair of the Special Broadcasting Service, and Ms Jane Papelman, the Managing Director. They are here today for a bipartisan event with SBS, which demonstrates strong support from across the Parliament, particularly reflecting social cohesion and contributing to our civics education. For the Prime Minister's benefit, I understand that Dr Pappas is also the Chair of the Sydney Rabbitohs. And I give the call to the honourable member for Indi.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. Your Universal Outdoor Mobile Obligation Bill has strong support and could pass this week, but it's been sitting on the notice paper for over a year. I've put forward several amendments, including vital reforms to help facilitate temporary disaster roaming. Recent mobile outages have shown that a hands-off approach to telecommunications isn't enough. Minister, why is the government going slow-mo on UOMO?
Order. Give the call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Indi for her question. The Universal Outdoor Mobile Obligation will enable, for the very first time, baseline outdoor mobile connectivity across Australia. It will substantially expand scope for people to seek help if they're lost, if they're injured, if they're facing natural disasters in areas without traditional terrestrial mobile coverage. But I know this is a really important issue for the member, and I thank her for her ongoing engagement in the UOMO bill today. I think it's fair to say that the electorate of Indi is a real exemplar of the kinds of communities that UOMO will assist. I was pleased to meet with the member for Indi earlier to hear her concerns on behalf of her constituents. Why hasn't it passed the House yet? As the member is aware, the Albanese Labor government has progressed several key pieces of legislation in the last 2 weeks, and I look forward to UOMO coming back for consideration in detail soon. I thank the member for her constructive proposed amendments. I will respond to them in full when we do consideration in detail, and I would remind her that the default start date for UOMO is 1 December 2027. So the number one factor in whether any obligation can commence on that date is the development of the direct-to-device market. That's the number one factor. So that's why we'll continue to assess industry readiness.
Call to the honourable member for Moreton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering real change that is creating a sustainable and responsible future for Australians when it comes to gambling reform and Australia's media landscape?
Call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for Moreton for her question. I hope that her knee is on the mend. The Albanese government is delivering real and meaningful reform to help Australians through tax cuts, through paid parental leave, help for first home buyers and action to keep kids safe online. But these are not the only ways we are delivering for Australians. People across the country rely on journalists and public interest media to be informed about issues that matter to them. The Albanese government is delivering direct support for the media through our $153 million investment in the News Media Assistance Program. The member for Moreton introduced me to Emily at the Queensland Chinese Times in Sunnybank to talk about the funding they have received through the Albanese government's Journalism Assistance Fund. This is a small newspaper, but it is an important part of the local community, helping people stay informed about what is happening and what's important to them. Publications like this ensure local voices are heard and that local stories are told. The media matters, journalism matters. Journalism is the lifeblood of a robust democracy. It holds people, businesses and governments to account, which is why the Albanese government is backing a strong and sustainable media sector. And there's never been a more critical time to ensure the sustainability of Australia's media sector. That's why we're progressing the news bargaining incentive legislation through Parliament this week, with coalition support. Keep up, there's 2 bills. We believe it is only fair that large digital platforms contribute to the hard work of journalists and the stories that enrich their feeds and drive their revenue. They should pay their fair share, and that's what the news bargaining incentive will ensure they do. If digital platforms do not do deals with news publishers, they will need to pay a charge, and any revenue raised will be distributed to the news media sector to support journalism in Australia. And in this parliament, in the last 2 days, we have delivered significant reforms which will build a sustainable, responsible future for Australians. This includes the intractably difficult job of reforming the NDIS, and this includes taking the strongest ever action to tackle the harms of gambling. In households today, we no longer just gather around one TV to watch our teams or our favourite shows. And our gambling advertising reforms acknowledge this, which is why amendments introduced yesterday go further to protect children from seeing gambling ads, be that via streaming or on TV. We are protecting children, supporting people at risk, while making reform workable and keeping industry accountable for their practices. Our gambling advertising reforms are focused where Australians need protection most, while ensuring the new rules are practical, enforceable and capable of delivering real change.
Call to the member for Herbert.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel. This morning, Renee Wilson, the CEO of the Families and Veterans Guild and partner of combat wounded Gary Wilson, told the media the first she heard of the Minister's discussion paper about his cruel cap was in question time yesterday. Why on earth hasn't the Minister picked up the phone to the CEO of the organisation representing Australia's war widows?
Call to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for his question, and I recognise his real dedication to these issues, of course, from his own service as well, and the great work he does, particularly in his community of Townsville, which is a key garrison city for our country. I have had engagements with Renee, as you mentioned. She does great work through her guild and the work that she does to support our veteran families, and I've had many engagements with her. And we've been clear when we announced the changes to Allied Health to improve access that we would also be consulting with the veteran community around how do we make sure that we ensure that there's no gap in service provision to our veteran community as a result of these changes. And we've been very clear about that, and we'll be starting that soon. And as I mentioned in question time yesterday, that will involve a discussion paper. I haven't had a direct conversation with her about the discussion paper, but we really look forward to seeing all of that feedback come in as part of that process, including from Renee and her organisation and the many other ex-service organisations around the country.
Before I call the member for McNamara, I'd like to draw the House's attention to an important delegation that's joined us on the floor of Parliament, and a historic one. For the first time in our Parliament's history, I get to welcome the Lord Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Tonga, led by His Excellency Lord Dyer, and his parliamentary delegation. Malo e lave mahi. Welcome to question time. You give the call to the member for McNamara.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering for Australian workers, and what could place this progress at risk?
Call to the Minister for Employment and the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for McNamara for his question, but for his fierce advocacy for workers in his electorate, but also right around the country. The Albanese Labor government is helping to deliver higher wages for workers because we know this is one of the best ways to help with cost of living pressures. We have delivered world-leading minimum standards to ensure gig workers do not have to rely on tips to make ends meet. And with the first minimum standard coming into force this week, some platform delivery drivers are now earning 25% more. It's this Labor government has also backed wage rises for our lowest paid workers each and every year we've been in government. And of course, it's been this Labor government that's reinvigorated enterprise bargaining, which is delivering higher wages for more workers. Just last week, the Education Minister introduced legislation to lock in a 15% pay increase for our early educators. Of course, this government closed the Labor liar loophole, which meant that many people doing the same job. OK, I'll do it again.
Order.
The Labor hire loophole. The Labor hire loophole with our same job. You know where I'm going. You don't want to get there. And of course, this government is getting wages moving, and getting wages moving is critical to this government's mandate. The ABS data released today shows that annual nominal wages have grown above 3% under this Labor government for the last 4 years. And this data also shows that real wages have grown in the June quarter. Now, Speaker, I know this is the bit they don't want me to get to, because I am asked what could put this progress at risk. And of course, we all know what will put this progress at risk. It is the Liberal, National and One Nation if they were to ever form government. Not only did those opposite, when they were in government, have low wages as a key design feature of their economic policy, but they failed to back pay rises for our low-paid workers. Of course, as I reported yesterday, the Leader of the Opposition described our laws that have led to pay rises as being disastrous. Disastrous. That is his attitude to wage increases. Of course, he is in good company with One Nation, who have consistently voted with the Liberals and Nationals to stop laws that will actually deliver pay increases to workers in this country. It is very clear that if the Liberals, Nationals and One Nation were to ever form government, workers' wages would be on the chopping block.
There was far too much noise during that answer. The member for Hunter interjected 11 times during that answer. He'll leave the chamber under 94A. You simply just can't continuously interject on people. I made that clear yesterday. It goes to both sides of the chamber. Now the House has come to order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Riverina.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel. Veterans and their families have lost faith in the Minister. Former Royal Australian Navy diver and Fair Care for Veterans spokesman John Armfield said this after the meeting with the Minister. I enlisted under the Navy values of courage, honour, honesty and loyalty, yet you failed to display any of these values, Minister. How can the Minister continue as Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel if he cannot uphold defence values?
Call to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. And the circumstances of Mr Armfield that he has gone through, and he gave evidence to the Royal Commission about that, and I saw that evidence and I've engaged with him about the circumstances he had to confront, were tragic and terrible. And I've said that to him, and I've said that to him before. And Navy apologised for some of that conduct to him as well, and very much should have done so. And so I can very much understand why he would feel that there has been a breach of faith with him in terms of the upholding of the Australian Defence Force values and his engagement. And so I understand that. I am sorry that he holds that view about me. And all I can do, as I try to do each and every day, is to make sure that we're continuing to the work of improving the system that exists to support our serving personnel and our veteran community and their families so that they get the service and the support that we all agree that they deserve.
Call to the honourable member for Melbourne.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. What progress has the Albanese Labor government made on wages, super and the budget? And what are the risks to this progress?
Call to the Treasurer.
Mr Speaker, and as the Minister for Employment told us a moment ago, we have seen real wages growth in the June quarter, and we have seen nominal wages growth higher than 3% for all 4 years of this Labor government. And I know that the member for Melbourne, as a real champion of the working people of that wonderful city, is very pleased to see that this government delivering nominal wages higher than 3% all throughout our government, never once achieved by those opposite in the previous government, Mr Speaker. When we came to office, real wages were falling sharply. They've risen in 8 of the last 11 quarters in annual terms. They went up today in the June quarter, but we acknowledge with this persistent inflation challenge in our economy, that puts pressure on real wages. We've acknowledged that in a number of different ways. So, Mr Speaker, this government has overseen higher nominal wages growth than we saw under those opposite. We're doing that, whether it's advancing workers during their working years or making sure that they've got a decent superannuation system when they retire. This government backs workers while those opposite attack them. We back them with stronger wages and we back them with a stronger superannuation system, getting super to 12%, payday super, super on paid parental leave, making sure that we strengthen this system, which is the envy of the world, to deliver economic security and retirement incomes for millions of Australian workers. Now, Mr Speaker, we're boosting wages, we're strengthening super, we're helping with the cost of living at the same time as we're strengthening the budget. And we saw that recognised overnight when Moody's, the second global ratings agency in the course of the last couple of weeks, reaffirmed Australia's AAA credit rating. And they did that because of the responsible way that we have gone about managing the budget, getting gross debt down $200 billion lower than what we inherited, the trajectory that those opposite left us when we came to office, Mr Speaker. And so I encourage the House to look at that Moody's statement overnight, which was effusive about the government's responsible economic management. Another welcome and powerful endorsement of this government's responsible economic management, Mr Speaker. Now, whether it comes to wages or superannuation or managing the budget responsibly, the contrast could be clearer. Could not be clearer, Mr Speaker. Those opposite have already racked up another $110 billion in commitments in the forward estimates alone, more than $500 billion over the next decade or so, Mr Speaker. The Shadow Treasurer says that he'll offset all that, but he won't tell us what that means for Medicare or wages or for super, Mr Speaker. That the next election the difference will be really clear. A Labor government and this Prime Minister backing workers and wages and super and strengthening the budget, and those opposite, Liberals, Nationals and One Nation, who hate superannuation because they don't support working people.
Has concluded. With the call to the member for Herbert.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel. Former Air Force fighter jet pilot Dr Tim Nelson spoke about the Minister's behaviour in a meeting, and I quote, "He walked into the room, refused to shake our hand, sat down with his arms crossed and rolled his eyes." Yesterday, the Minister told the House, and I quote, "I don't agree with the characterisation that you've just outlined." Is the Minister calling this veteran a liar?
We call to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the member for his question. I meet with many veterans, veteran family members, defence personnel on a regular basis, and I respect every position that they put to me in what they say and describe, but I also am not in the habit of repeating the content and detail of all of those conversations and meetings in the Parliament every day. And I provided the answer that I provided yesterday.
Give a call to the honourable member. Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question's to the Minister for Infrastructure. How is the Albanese Labor government working with the New South Wales government to deliver for the community and improve the Mitchells Causeway on the Great Western Highway?
Give a call to the Minister for Infrastructure, the Minister for Transport, the Minister for Regional Development and the Minister for Local Government.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for Macquarie for her question, but also for her incredible advocacy for her electorate, particularly for the peoples of the Blue Mountains who have been affected by the closure of Victoria Pass since March. I also acknowledge the advocacy of the member for Calare, who's not in the chamber at the moment, but thank him for the thank you note that he just sent me during question time. I told the House we would have an update to provide very, very soon, and I'm very pleased that we can now share that update. Today I joined the member for Macquarie in Mount Victoria to announce that the Albanese government is partnering with the Minns government will fully fund and deliver the reconstruction of the Mitchells Causeway. Our $100 million commitment, matched by the New South Wales government, will now build a new stable and secure bridge deck that will sit above the 194-year-old convict bridge, affectionately known as the Mitchells Causeway, and effectively we're building a bridge above the old bridge. Today we also announced that we won't just restore the 2 lanes on the Mitchell Causeway, but the new bridge will be better than it was before with an additional eastbound passing lane. We've not let a minute go to waste with work on restoring the causeway, and the original 2 lanes is already underway, and we'll start work on the additional lanes soon. This was very welcome news for anyone heading up into the mountains from the Central West, and this new passing lane will give cars the freedom to safely navigate around slow-moving trucks and make the climb easier for truck drivers as well. It's been incredibly tough for residents on both sides of Victoria Pass since March, with serious defects identified forcing its closure. From day one, we have been working very closely with the New South Wales government. We've been very clear from the start that our government would support them in funding and a delivery to fix this project. The New South Wales government, led by Minister Aitchison, moved very quickly to assess the bridge, develop a plan to fix it and to get it reopened next year. And because of that focused priority work, we believe we will have the new road deck in place and the highway opened and reconnected by mid-2027. Because this $200 million commitment, it's a joint commitment of both levels, of both state and federal governments, not only seeing the causeway rebuilt but built back better. This is how you work collaboratively with state governments. We're very pleased to join with them in that announcement this morning, and I want to give a shout-out to the workforce there. They have been on site. Since day one, the geotech work, all of that done, and it's a great example of what communities can do together. And again, thank very much the communities around Victoria Pass for their patience, but also you have some very strong advocates in this place, particularly the member for Macquarie, for her great work in making sure we're aware of what was happening for this project.
Before I call the member for Wentworth, I'm also pleased to inform the House that we've been joined by delegation from the Queensland Parliament, including Corinne McMillan MP, Michael Healy MP, Nikki Boyd MP and the Honourable Glenn Butcher MP. And I also noted in the gallery is Father Frank Brennan, SJ AO. Welcome to Question Time. Give the call to the Honourable Member for Wentworth.
My question's for the Treasurer. Australian real wages have fallen 5% since March 2021. The only sustainable antidote is productivity growth, and business and economists agree deregulation is central to that. I welcome budget measures to address regulatory constraints, but we need more, and the budget didn't curb what the PC calls Australia's red tape impulse. Will the government act to reset incentives around regulation by something like a regulatory review committee with similar importance to the ERC, hard targets to departments to offset new regulations with deregulation, or a Minister for Better Regulation?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank you to the honourable member for her interest in this important topic. The last part of her question, Katie Gallagher is the Minister for Better Regulation, and I'm proud to support her work. In fact, the whole Cabinet is engaged in one way or another in this important task of economic reform, and particularly when it comes to better regulation. As part of that, I also shout out the Assistant Treasurer and the Assistant Minister of the Treasury for the work that they do. The Assistant Treasurer gave a wonderful speech today at the National Press Club about some important issues. I thank the honourable member for her question for a number of reasons, but partly because I acknowledge the important contribution that she made to the Economic Reform Roundtable, which began a year ago today. Today is the one-year anniversary. And that Reform Roundtable did bring together a whole bunch of people to shape the economic future of this country. Now, this government has delivered more economic reform in the year since that roundtable than in the quarter of a century which preceded it. And that reform was really important because it helped shape an ambitious tax reform agenda, the broadest productivity agenda and the most net savings in a budget in a generation. And better regulation was important to all three of those objectives, Mr Speaker. When it comes to targets, the budget made it clear that our objective here, our expectation here, is that the combination of our efforts on regulation will cut compliance costs in our economy by more than $10 billion a year, Mr Speaker. And about a tenth of that, almost a tenth of that, is in the financial sector alone, Mr Speaker. And so whether it's the omnibus bill that we passed on regulatory reform, whether it's the way that we've changed the statement of expectations for our regulators, whether it's the better regulation roadmap through the Council of Financial Regulators, whether it's the steps we're taking with the states on national competition policy, I acknowledge Assistant Minister Lee in that regard, abolishing nuisance tariffs, Mr Speaker, speeding up approvals, fast-tracking the housing approvals in particular. I acknowledge the Housing Minister and the Environment Minister, streamlining the construction code, a whole bunch of steps that the government is taking to meet the kinds of objectives that the honourable member has asked me about. The honourable member also asked me whether there's more work to do. Of course there is. Of course there is. When it comes to better regulation, there's not a destination here. It requires ongoing work. But what we've shown in the years since the Economic Reform Roundtable is a willingness right across the Cabinet, right across the government, to cut compliance costs where we can, to make sure that regulation is serving a useful purpose, because we do acknowledge, as the honourable member does, just how important this is to turning around a couple of decades of poor productivity performance in our economy.
Call to the honourable member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Financial Services. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering real outcomes for Australians with superannuation and improving the security, stability and integrity of Australia's superannuation system? Are there any threats?
Give the call to the Honourable the Assistant Treasurer and the Honourable Minister for Financial Services.
I thank the member for Werriwa for her question, and I acknowledge that she has been a champion of the super system throughout her time in this place. She's advocated for lifting the SG rate, for payday super and for closing the gender gap. The collapse of Shield and First Guardian was devastating for thousands of Australians who lost retirement savings they had spent decades building. These were not reckless investors taking speculative bets. In many cases, they were ordinary Australians who believed they were making sensible decisions about their retirement and instead found themselves exposed to serious misconduct, poor governance and harmful sales practices. Earlier today, this government announced a comprehensive package of reforms to strengthen the security, stability and integrity of our superannuation system and to better protect the promise of a dignified retirement for future generations. We announced a major crackdown on harmful lead generation practices. Shield and First Guardian exposed an ecosystem where consumers could click on an online advertisement, have their data harvested and sold, receive a call from an unlicensed lead generator and then be funnelled towards risky investment products. We are banning unlicensed real-time communications about superannuation. We are tightening anti-hawking laws. We are strengthening penalties and we are targeting the data harvesting and broking practices that sit at the front end of these harmful business models. The objective is simple: to stop consumer harm before it occurs and shut down the pathways that bad actors use to gain access to Australians' retirement savings. The second pillar that I announced today is stronger accountability and compensation arrangements across superannuation platforms. Australians should be able to trust that if a trustee places a product in front of members, that trustee stands behind it. That's why we're creating a new framework that enables ASIC to direct trustees to commence remediation processes where there are credible concerns that they have failed in their obligations. Where trustee failures have contributed to losses, members should have access to clear and practical pathways to compensation. We are also giving APRA powers to ensure trustees offering higher-risk products have the financial capability to meet those responsibilities, that they have the backing to stand behind their obligations. These reforms will provide compensation closer to the source of failure. And the third pillar is improving access to safe, affordable and reliable financial advice. As our superannuation system matures, Australians increasingly need help navigating complex retirement decisions. We're progressing long-awaited financial advice reforms. Taken together, these reforms address the lessons of Shield and First Guardian, strengthen consumer protections right across the system and improve accountability and expand access to advice. They put superannuation members first and help ensure Australians can have confidence in their retirement system.
Give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
Prime Minister, yesterday the Minister for Veterans Affairs admitted he got it wrong in refusing to meet with veterans to discuss Labor's cruel cap on allied health services. He also got it wrong on trying to put a use-by date on medallic recognition. He got it wrong on refusing to support the Invictus Games. And he got it wrong on cutting funding for the family of fallen Victoria Cross hero Cameron Baird VC MG. Why won't the Prime Minister sack this incompetent and disrespectful minister?
Order. The member for Corangamite will leave the chamber under 94A. She's on a warning. Highly disorderly to interject on anyone, particularly the Leader of the Opposition, during his question. Order. The rules apply to everyone in this place. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I have every confidence in the Minister for Veterans Affairs. And indeed, I consider it to be one of the great privileges of my time in this place that I, as Prime Minister, but previously as well, get to engage with those men and women who wear our uniform, who serve in our name and who deserve our total respect at all times for what they do. Our veterans stepped up for us, and we must step up for them. And I spoke earlier today about my first experience overseas back in 1986 with those extraordinary veterans led by Weary Dunlop. Since then, every single conflict has seen Australia's men and women serve with honour, with dignity, and they deserve our respect. Now, the Minister inherited a system where the former Minister for Veterans Affairs, the member for Calare, you will recall the actions that he had to take.
He resigned because you wouldn't fund
The Minister for Infrastructure is warned. The member for the Prime Minister has concluded his answer. Order. 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 When the House comes to order. Order. When the House comes to order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Dixon.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. How are the Albanese Labor government's housing tax reforms helping Australians? What approaches would make it more difficult for Australians to get a roof over their heads?
Call to the Minister for Housing and the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Dixon for this question. Speaker, not only is this woman a remarkable Australian, but she is one of the strongest voices in this parliament for housing policy, and I want to thank her for her leadership. Speaker, our housing tax reforms have two really clear goals. The first is to give first home buyers a better shot at getting the keys to their own home. And we want to encourage more investment in building the homes Australia needs. Now, it's early days since the budget, but we are seeing some really encouraging signs in what is coming out of the sector. Speaker, the latest ABS data shows that lending to investors buying new dwellings is up more than 27% on last year. What remarkable growth. And at the same time, Speaker, we are seeing investor lending for construction rise 4.4%. It is now 20% higher than it was a year ago. Speaker, that same data shows us that investor lending to buy existing homes fell
almost 15% in the June quarter, and data from our 5% deposit program, Speaker, shows us that we have got first home buyers around this country going to auctions and they are winning. Now, Speaker, these are the exact directions that we want to see from the housing market. We want to see less investor money chasing up the house prices of homes that we already have. We want to see more investment helping build the homes our country needs, and we want to see those scales tipped right back in favour of first home buyers. Now, Speaker, we are seeing support for these measures from some, frankly, quite surprising quarters. And I want to share with you a quote from Commonwealth Bank CEO Matt Comyn, who has said, "Investing or supporting businesses so they can invest, grow and employ people is going to deliver a better overall outcome for our country than people buying and selling housing to each other." We had the National Australia Bank's chief economist Sally Auld say on 7:30, in the long run, it's owner-occupiers who are the winners in all of this, in the sense we're going to redistribute the ownership of housing away from investors and more towards owner-occupiers. Now, Speaker, we have got even leaders in our banking sector who can see that these changes are in the national interest. Speaker, why can't the Coalition and One Nation see the same? Speaker, when we look at the facts, we have got home ownership rates for young people around this country falling through the floor. Speaker, 81% of millennials and Gen Z tell us that they are delaying major life decisions, delaying getting married, delaying having a child, because they are concerned about housing insecurity, yet still those opposite spend their time in this parliament defending a broken housing system. Well, I say very directly to Australians, we hear you, we see the pain that you are in, and we'll keep delivering you the real change you need to get into a home of your own.
Give a call to the honourable member for Mayo.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. It's reported approximately 51,000 non-citizens, 1/5 of the overall applicants, have accessed the 5% First Home Buyers Deposit Scheme, many of whom may own overseas properties. Rightly, the government does not allow HECS debt to be accrued by permanent residents, as they're not Australian citizens. So why does the government expose Australian citizens to the risk of loan default from non-Australians accessing the 5% deposit scheme?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. And we've been through this before in the parliament. There is tightly controlled eligibility for this scheme. Temporary residents are not eligible for the scheme, despite what's been inferred and said by the Leader of the Opposition. The only people who are eligible for this scheme is citizens of our country and permanent residents. Now, Speaker, permanent residents are very likely to have lived in our country for a long time. The hint is in the word permanent. These are people who are working as doctors and nurses. They are aged care workers who are caring for our elderly. They are carers who are working in disability and other sections. They are permanent residents across our country and they are helping our country grow. Now, I'm hearing a lot of interjection from the Leader of the Opposition. And, Speaker, I want to remind him again that the words that he utters in this parliament are not just heard by the people he thinks. I'm responding to an interjection, Speaker.
Well, I can handle it, Minister. Thank you. Order. The manager is entitled to raise his point of order, so I'll hear his point of order.
Out of respect to the member who asked this question, it didn't have anything to do with the opposition, and I think the minister should be brought back to the question itself.
Ridiculous. Yes, there was no. I'm just reading the question. There was no analysis of opposition policy, so I'm just going to get the minister to get back to the 5 deposit scheme, but I'm going to make sure if she is doing any policy relating to the topic, she's got to, or comparing or contrast, she's got to be relevant to the question she was asked. Yes, the Leader of the House.
Yeah, just in terms of the compare and contrast issue, there's a series of different points throughout that question, just looking at it now. It's not even limited to one policy area. It contains other comparisons, so the capacity to be able to compare and contrast is broader in that than it would otherwise. Take the call if you want to chat.
Okay. We'll get through this. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Speaker, the minister was referencing specifically the Leader of the Opposition. Now, there was nothing in there about the Leader of the Opposition in that.
Well, we'll be able to sort this out and I'll hear from the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. The minister was referring to the policy issue which related directly to the question that was asked. The question that was asked went to eligibility for the 5% deposits. It is perfectly relevant for the minister, and indeed, in order to give an answer to that question, it is necessary for the minister to point out who is eligible for this scheme. And the fact is...
The manager was heard in silence. Order. I give the courtesy to the manager. I'll ask the same courtesy to be applied to the Prime Minister.
And the fact is that that is why the minister needs to go through the way the scheme operates and why the explanation of its eligibility is critical.
Order. And it will help with things if the Leader of the Opposition ceases interjecting so the minister doesn't respond to interjections as well. Everyone is correct in this argument. I want to make sure, as I said, if there's compare and contrast regarding this policy, if there's compare and contrasting going on, it's related to this policy. That's my point, and that's my ruling. The Minister has the call.
Thank you so much, Speaker. And just to the compare and contrast in relation to this policy, I want the parliament to know that actually, since we last met, the Leader of the Opposition was busted making a false claim about the eligibility of this policy. And I want to quote to you what he said. He said, Labor has made the 5% deposit program available to anyone the day they arrive.
The Minister just pause for a second. Resume. Just take your seat for a moment. I'm not happy with the level of interjections during this question time today. There is far, far too much ongoing interjection. The member for Lyne is continuously interjecting. I'll have to put you on a warning, member for Lyne. And that goes for both sides. I don't like issuing a general warning, but I'm getting close to doing it for everyone inside this House today. So please, I am asking everyone to listen to the minister, to show respect, and to show respect for the person asking the question as well. It's not good enough, and I'm asking everyone now to do better. The minister will continue her answer.
Thank you, Speaker. And I was just reporting to the parliament that in the sitting break, the Leader of the Opposition was busted saying behind closed doors, Labor has made the 5% deposit program available to anyone the day they arrive in the country. And I want to call that out, Speaker, because it just speaks to the disgraceful reflex for division that those opposite bring forward to all of the problems facing our country. It wasn't just that, Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition actually said publicly, when he announced that he wanted to withdraw support for permanent residents, he said, when you commit to this country, we'll commit to you. And I want our loved Chinese Australian community and I want our loved Indian Australian community to know that we see your commitment to our country, we respect it and we value it. Speaker, this is a program our government is incredibly proud of. 260,000 people have the keys to their own home today because of this fantastic support that we are offering them, Speaker. Not only are those focused on division, they do not have a single sensible thing to say about housing, the most important issue facing our country. Speaker, we're not going to be distracted by their obsession with conflict. We've got housing issues facing our country, and that's why we're stepping up and making real change to Australia's housing system.
The member for Wright. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for the Treasurer and the Leader of the Opposition. I'm just bringing the House to order because I would like to hear from the honourable member for Dunkley. She has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Small Business. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting Australian small businesses to have certainty to invest in their business?
Give a call to the Honourable Minister for International Development, the Minister for Small Business and the Minister for Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker. And can I thank the member for Dunkley, not just for her question, but for the tireless way that she comes here every single day and advocates for the small businesses in her electorate of Dunkley. Mr Speaker, there are 2.7 million small businesses across Australia, and behind this figure are millions of Australians, mums and dads, migrants, young and old, people with a passion and a talent. But starting a small business is more than just monetising a passion or a talent or a skill. It's about contributing to our economy and, importantly, also contributing to our community. And when people take that plunge and they decide to start a business, they need confidence and they need certainty. Certainty to be able to make the long-term decisions for growth and sustainability for their business. And that's why we announced in this year's budget, Mr Speaker, that we would make the $20,000 instant asset write-off permanent. And I'm very happy to update the House that as of this morning, the Albanese Labor government has delivered on that commitment. And the $20,000 instant asset write-off is now a permanent feature of our economy. What this means, Mr Speaker, it means that small businesses who want to invest in equipment, in machinery, in tools or assets can do so with confidence. They can plan ahead. They can plan ahead without having to constantly worry about whether or not the instant asset write-off will be held for another year, as they have had to do in the past. And small businesses are already taking advantage of the instant asset write-off in fairly significant numbers. In fact, the latest figures show that around 300,000 businesses claimed the instant asset write-off in the 24-25 financial year. Now, importantly, this measure applies on a per-asset basis, so businesses can write off multiple purchases during the year, and it can also be used multiple times during the financial year. So whether it's one coffee machine or three, one new fridge or an entire fit-out, small businesses can write off the assets that they need, when they need, and as many times as they need. Mr Speaker, it's just one of the ways that this Albanese Labor government is supporting small business. It's just one of the ways that we're making a difference, a real difference to small businesses. And it's one of the ways that we back small businesses because we know that small businesses back Australia.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I ask that further questions to be posted on the notice paper.